playoff time in Major League Soccer, and the race to the MLS Cup is heating up. Big names, big moments, and plenty of storylines as the league's best teams fight to keep their seasons alive. Inter Miami is front and center, of course, as the spotlight follows Lionel Messi into the postseason. But there's also plenty of excitement across the league, including here at home, where San Diego FC is gearing up for a huge weekend matchup. Joining us live from Miami right now to help us break it all down is David Gass, one of the most well-known voices in American soccer. He has covered MLS for years, co-hosting the league's official Extra Time radio podcast, and now he leads SoccerWise HQ, bringing sharp insight to every corner of the game. David, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my favorite time of year.
All right, let's dig right into it. We know you love this, and this weekend is really going to be special with playoffs underway. What are some of the things that you look for that signal a team is peaking at the right time?
It's a long season in Major League Soccer. Historically, in soccer in many countries around the world, the regular season is the championship. So just getting through that for a lot of players feels like enough. And now you have to turn on and play the biggest games of the season. So you look at teams often that have the best stars, the players that can carry you through the tough moments in a playoff game, and home field advantage, which in Major League Soccer is as big as, if not bigger than any other league in the world. And so the teams that are the higher seeds, the team that will host more games, or when you get into the single elimination games, all the games, of course, of this series, those are the teams that are going to have the best chance to go through.
Speaking of home field advantage, San Diego FC playing this weekend. From what you've observed, what makes their path different or maybe even more challenging than other teams so far?
Well, the big story for San Diego is what can you do in your first year? And it is so interesting, as I said, that Major League Soccer goes from, okay, can you find this flow through a long season to can you turn it on and create and have good moments in the highest intensity games? It's very similar to college basketball, where it's 30 games and all of a sudden it's single elimination. And what you're working on all season is a little different than what you need to do. So San Diego has proven that they can be great across the long season. But we actually have evidence over the last few years of new teams that have done that and then really stumbled. St. Louis won the Western Conference as an expansion team 3 years ago. Now, they didn't do so in as impressive a fashion as San Diego, but they were the top seed and they lost in the first round to their rivals in Kansas City. And so there is a little bit of fear for a lot of people of, will a lot of these players who have never been in this moment before and have obviously never been in a situation like this as a group, can they come together and can they knock out teams that have experience? So what would end up happening for San Diego if they get through to the next round? They would play Minnesota or Seattle. And Seattle is as battle-tested and as hardened as a team that exists in Major League Soccer. And Minnesota went to the U.S. Open Cup semifinals in another competition this year. Seattle won the Leagues Cup over Inter Miami. So San Diego is going to be the least experienced playoff team in every series they play in. And the question is, can they figure out ways to still play their style and still perform?
And we don't know if they can handle the pressure of the playoffs yet. So we'll have to see this weekend. So broader question here, how is the league evolving compared to past seasons, in your opinion?
I think you see with more teams coming in, more styles of how teams are built. And there's not going to be a copycat league like what you see in MLB and NBA and NFL, because Major League Soccer exists in a wider ecosystem. And so you have to have different styles to function because you are not the top of the pyramid when it comes to world soccer. So San Diego has come in and they've done things a little bit differently. They're connected to this Right to Dream Academy, which is spread across Africa and Europe, bringing young players and giving them opportunities that in Nashville wouldn't give players of that age and that experience level. And then you've got teams on the other side like LAFC, which go and get Sun Young Kim, who is the biggest star in the world, one of the biggest stars in the world, the biggest Korean star of all time, coming from the Premier League, and they're pushing experienced players. You have some teams that have found a more defensive style, some teams that have found a more offensive style. And so I think we're starting to see this league become much more spread out, and it allows different styles of teams to be successful. So Philadelphia won the regular season this year. They don't spend big on a superstar, and yet Lionel Messi signed a 3-year contract extension yesterday, and he is the highest paid player in the league, and Son is the highest bought player in the league for $25 million. So you see all these different styles now across the league, and all of them can be successful if their teams lean in and do it the best way possible.
Okay, so what do you think about farming out to find new players? Do you think that's successful not only in MLS but in other sports?
Yeah, I think for soccer and especially Major League Soccer, you have to remember there's 200,000 professional soccer players around the world, and so people often, when you have American pro sports like the NBA or MLB, say, well, you can't have expansion because you'll run out of talent. That's never going to be a conversation with soccer. There is talent in every single corner of the world. There are massive leagues. There are high-paying clubs. Major League Soccer just has to decide to be competitive, and they have to up their salary cap, and they have to push to allow these players to come in. MLS has taken steps over the years. They added what they call the designated player rule, which allows you to pay a player like Chucky Lozano and Andres Dreyer for San Diego outside of the salary cap. So you can go and pay them as much as a Messi would require to bring them in. But then at the same time, they brought in other rules to help bring younger players into the league who can develop around for a little bit longer. And so there are these mechanisms put in place to help the league expand and grow. I still think it's all a little bit too low. I would like to see it just push the salary cap higher and give teams a little bit more flexibility, go out and build the style of teams they want. But I think when you look at soccer specifically, you're always going to have to deal with bringing talent in the league and selling it out of the league because you're part of a global market.
Yeah, if only they had more money to give to each team. You're really right about that. And it's interesting to see how much talent is so young, too. I mean, I'm already looking at a kid on my son's 9-year-old soccer team. He is incredible. We got to watch him, David. But
I'm sure San Diego FC has eyes.
You know what? You know what? You never know. We'll keep an eye on him. Okay, so back to the playoffs here. Now, with so many teams, you were mentioning a lot of different teams, including St. Louis earlier, now having a chance in the playoffs. How does that impact how we as fans should watch this first round?
It's interesting for a lot of different teams because with soccer, you have multiple competitions. So, for example, Nashville, they've won a U.S. Open Cup, which is a separate cup competition that happens outside of the regular season. So Nashville comes into a first round playoff series with different pressure. They've already arguably had a good year. Some would say Vancouver, who went to our regional Champions League final for the first time in their club's history and won the Canadian Championship, which is a cup competition outside of the league, that they've arguably already had a good year. So the pressure is different for different teams, and the expectations are, of course, different if you're a lower seed, if you're a higher seed. One of the odd things that happened this year is the Eastern Conference was much better than the Western Conference. So when you look at the standings, the Eastern Conference had 5 or 6 teams that would be a top 2 seed in the West. So if you look at this and say, okay, we're a Chicago or we're a Nashville or we're an NYCFC, we put up 56 points, which in past years would mean we're one of the 3 best teams. But this year, we're an away seed in the first round. Do you shift expectations or do you look at that team and say, no, in the past, if this is how good your team was, this was the expectation, and you should be going to a semifinal or a final. I think each team's going to have to find ways and their fan bases to judge that differently.
It's a very interesting perspective. Now, speaking of fans, what should SDFC fans be most excited about in this playoff push?
Well, it starts with the fact that they beat Portland 4-0 in the final game of the regular season last week, and now they play Portland in the first round because the Timbers won the wild card game to get into this, and can't think of a better matchup than one you just dominated on the road. And I think for this San Diego team, there aren't a lot of teams with full answers in the Western Conference. That's why these teams struggle. Teams had hot stretches, but they weren't able to show that, yes, we have answers no matter how teams come out and play against us, or we can play through injuries. So for San Diego, the opening is there. The door is open for a chance to make history, to go to a final. And right now, they've had the best expansion season for a regular season in history. No questions asked. The only little debate is, in 1998, Chicago won a trophy in their first year. Now, the league was much different back then. It was only 2 years old. So I'd argue an expansion team, but in an expansion league is a little bit easier. For San Diego, if they can go to a final and make and win a championship, they would, no question, be the greatest expansion side in MLS history.
That would be incredible, especially with so many of the World Cup games coming to the U.S. It would be so crazy going into 2026. Okay, let's talk dark horse teams. So if you had to personally pick one dark horse team this postseason that most fans maybe were already talking about on social media, maybe underrated, who would that be for you and why?
I think one of them would have to be the Columbus Crew. Columbus over the last 4 years has won 2 titles, and they have, I think, the best coach in Major League Soccer. They sold their best player at the start of this year because, like I talked about, he was a big time player when he came in, and he wanted to go and play in Spain for a chance to make the Colombian World Cup roster. And so they did the right thing by him and they sold him, but they've struggled to replace him. And the players they've replaced him with, a lot of them have struggled with injuries. So they fell all the way down to the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. And that means they'll have to play their rival Cincinnati on the road to open up the postseason. And no matter what, they will be playing away for the rest of the postseason. But the bones of a championship team are still there. The belief is still there. And they were upset as a high seed last year. And I think they remember how much the playoffs can be different from the regular season because of that. And so I think they'll go into this playoff series and say, scrap everything else that happened. It's 0-0 right now, and we know who we are. We're a team that has been here before, and we have belief in ourselves.
All right. Okay. We'll see if you're right about them. Now, looking ahead to, we just mentioned this a second ago, the World Cup 2026. What are your thoughts on the World Cup in general next year?
It is going to be the biggest soccer tournament we've ever seen. I think it's going to be the biggest sporting event of all time. It is a 48-team World Cup. That's never happened before. The past World Cups at most were 32. So the teams that are coming in are going to bring more energy, more fans, more people are going to be connected to this World Cup. And I'm doing a lot of the work for us here at SoccerWise and Kickback on preparing for this World Cup. And every single country you go to, they've got a fan base in the U.S. Cape Verde is the smallest country to ever qualify for the World Cup. They have a voting poll in Boston. That's how big the Cape Verdean population is there. You look at the teams like Senegal and Morocco that just qualified, and there are massive populations of these fans already in the United States, besides the fans that are going to travel over. I think it's going to be a sporting spectacle like we've never seen before. I think for people in the U.S., they're going to come across this experience that they've never seen before. I've been to 3 World Cups myself. When you see 10,000 people march down the street singing in a language you've never heard before, all in the same color, it draws a little bit of attention. So I think for a lot of people that don't really realize that it's going to be a part of their lives, it is going to be this huge event. I think the country is going to fall in love with the tournament overall. It's the most hopeful I've been about the U.S. and their performances in the last 3 years. So that's trending in the right direction. And I think it's really going to captivate people.
Incredible insight. It really will be a cultural gathering of sorts, and I think people are going to spend half their salaries on these tickets. It will be well worth it. David Gass, we certainly appreciate you joining us live today. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.